Good afternoon, Ben.
What's up, Jonty? Good to see you again.
Likewise, I was just checking out that article you sent me on hyperbaric oxygen.
Yeah. Age reversing hyperbaric oxygen. Now you're familiar with hyperbaric oxygen, right? High
Uh,
pressure oxygen.
yeah,
Hyperbaric means high pressure. They
yeah,
draw
yeah.
oxygen into you. And they have them in hospitals. They have these hyperbaric oxygen chambers in hospitals. And
Mm.
I've been suggesting hyperbaric oxygen for people who are dealing with cancer for many years.
Ah,
But hyperbaric oxygen is just a good general health strategy. And I was not surprised to read this
mm.
article, which I read it in Science Daily. That's the one I sent you. But it was published. I'm not sure where it's published, but it's from Tel Aviv University in Israel.
Mm.
Hyperbaric oxygen reversed aging, which was very interesting. I'm not
Mm.
surprised, but
Mm.
it's nice to see that hyperbaric oxygen is getting some cred.
Yeah.
Oxygenation is it's one of those simple things that we can all do to improve our health. We're
Mm.
always looking for fancy strategies and fancy protocols and all kinds of formulas and all these medical strategies for improving the immune system and healing diseases and preventing or slowing down aging. But something as simple as breathing, something as simple as correct breathing can go a
Mm.
long way towards improving your health. And you don't need a hyperbaric oxygen chamber to oxygenate your body. Just effective breathing.
Mm.
We tend to clench when we're under stress. I mean, think of something right now that's stressful to you, and you'll kind of feel how your body tightens up. And that happens to us over the course of a lifetime, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of times. In a day, it may happen 10, 15 times, and you add
Mm.
it all up, and you start to get these microscopic pockets of contraction in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
body. And this lack of oxygenation is what ultimately leads to aging and then our demise. So something as simple as breathing can do so many good things, including opening up our blood vessels, improving the circulation, lowering blood pressure, reducing acidity in the blood. That's another thing that oxygenation does is it improves the blood pH. In fact, a lot of people
Mm.
hear about, a lot of people know about blood pH these days and alkalinity and acidity. And I get
Yeah.
asked, what kind of foods can I eat? Or
Mm.
asked, what kind of food should I stay away from? And while it's true that some foods tend to make the body more acidic, especially processed foods and sugary foods, the most important way that we can alkalinize our blood and reduce acidity is oxygen.
It's to breathe.
Oxygen is alkaline.
Yeah.
Inhaling oxygen is alkaline,
Mm.
alkalinizing, and blowing off carbon dioxide reduces acidity because you blow off acid in the exhalation. And by the way,
Mm.
the exhalation is more important than the inhalation. It's better to give than it is to receive. The exhalation is really when you lower or you relax the body.
Mm.
Exhalation activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the relaxation nervous system. So learning how to breathe correctly is really important, not just focusing on inhalation, but exhalation. Another important distinction is mouth breathing versus nose breathing. A lot of people are
Mm.
mouth breathers, but human beings should be nose breathers. Nose is for breathing, mouth is for eating. When you breathe through the mouth, you increase mucus secretion in the lungs and in the respiratory tract. You reduce immunity. The nose has vagal receptors or parasympathetic nervous system, relaxation
Mm.
nervous system receptors in the top of the nose. You also release more nitric oxide when you breathe in through the nose than you do when you breathe in through the mouth. Nitric oxide is very important for vasodilation, opening up blood vessels, and for relaxation. And nose breathers have better immune systems. Breathing nasally is better for the immune system than breathing through the mouth. So everybody's all focusing on immunity and things that they could do for the immune system.
Mm.
Nose breathing, nasal breathing, is one of the best things you could do for immunity. So it seems like breathing would be the easiest thing to do, right? We'd all know how to breathe, but we don't breathe. And we do all know how to breathe, but we don't breathe correctly. Also, by the way, when you breathe through the mouth, or mouth breathers tend to have more problems with sleep and sleep apnea
Mm.
and snoring.
Mm.
So breathing through the nose, if you find yourself with sleep apnea or problems falling asleep, or if you find that you're congested, sometimes people will get congested when they're mouth breathing. You might want to focus on nasal breathing.
Ben, one of my favorite stories that you told on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie was something about how you were fortunate to visit this lady who was having some health problems,
Yeah.
an older woman,
Yeah.
and you took one look at her and you said, well, hold on a second. Now, why don't we just breathe? Why don't you
Yeah,
just stand up and I'll help you a little bit.
yeah,
And it was an instant transformation.
instant. She had
Mm,
Parkinson's disease and she couldn't stop
mm,
shaking. Ever seen
mm,
somebody with really bad Parkinson's? It's horrifying. But very few people, I would say nobody, has Parkinson's disease when they're in the bathtub,
mm,
when they're taking a bath. You don't nobody has tremors in the bathtub because
mm,
everything's relaxed.
mm,
So learning how to relax the body is really important for folks who are dealing with movement disorders.
mm,
And one of the fastest ways to relax the body is breathing. Also, I think I mentioned this, but for lowering blood pressure, one of the great strategies for lowering blood pressure is learning to breathe. I have an app on my phone called Breathing Zone, which just walks you through the breathing process. It
mm.
teaches you to inhale and exhale. There's a little flower that goes in and that goes out as you're inhaling and as you're exhaling. And you can even have there's even a voice in there that goes, breathe in, breathe out. It's really cool. And I
Right.
do it every morning and every evening.
Neat. Well, you know the hyperbaric aspect is interesting to me as well. I've had some interesting conversations with friends of the biochem ilk who would talk about changes to the Earth's environment and how that could have dramatically affected what it was like to be alive. I know there was a period of
Oh,
time.
back in the day, prehistoric times,
Well, there was a period of time where you could have
mosquito
a
that's big as a
mosquito
bird.
that's about yay big.
From
Of
all the
course, insects they aerate themselves by motion and just a pumping mechanism. So that's why they never really grow very large, is that they can only get to a certain size and
fluctuations.
successfully oxygenate. Well, here are these
Yeah.
mosquitoes that are about as big as your cat or dog. There must have been something else going on there with regards to the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere at the
Yeah,
time.
there was more oxygen. We only have about 19% or so of the air is oxygen. And if it was, 21% or 22%, the planet would probably explode.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of what happens historically. Is that I think it
Yeah.
was about 250 million years ago when we really entered the age of fire, when we started having massive forest fires all over the world. But there's this kind of balancing act that nature does, where if you get too much oxygen, then
That's right.
a
That's right.
fire will start in the rain and you can't put it out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things. Oxygen doesn't burn necessarily, but it increases burning.
Mm,
Fire is technically oxidation, and that's why if you have a fireplace and you want to crank the fire, you pump oxygen in it. Or if
hmm
you want to put the fire out, you rob it of oxygen by putting sand on top of it, or foam or water even.
And the
So it's
body is
really
a fire. The body
oxidation
is a little
process.
mini fire. So
What's that?
and the body is kind of like a
Body
little.
does the same thing. The body runs itself on fire,
Mm,
actually, on quantum fire.
mm,
It's the same process, but it's happening at the quantum level. A fire is really interesting. You can't really hold fire because fire is not a thing. What you're seeing when you're seeing fire is a process that's
yeah,
happening.
right.
And that same process that happens in a log also happens in your body at the quantum level. And that's how we get energy. Energy occurs through oxidation, and
Mm,
fire is a type of oxidation. It's a macro oxidation, and in our cells we have a nano-oxidative process that occurs in our mitochondria,
mm,
and that's how we derive energy. That's why oxygen is so important. Oxygen is how we derive energy. Another really important place to respirate is while you're eating,
mm.
because the combustion of the derivation of energy from food requires oxygen. So making sure that you're respirating while you're eating is
Mm,
really something to focus on too.
Well, a lot of our ancient rituals actually have a lot of sense to them. You sit down at the dinner table with
Yeah,
your family and you all say thank you.
yeah, grace.
And then there's also as a parent, I really encourage my children to realize that it's not a denominational thing, but when we're at the dinner table, there's a certain etiquette, there's a certain behavior.
Yeah,
Uh,
all that you want to be calm when you're eating. You're
mm,
activating the parasympathetic nervous system. That's really one of the places where oxygen becomes relevant, or it becomes easy to understand why oxygen and respiration is so important, is
mm,
by understanding the distinction between the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And you're hearing a lot now about the parasympathetic nervous system. You and I have been talking about it for
mm,
years
mm.
on our little chats, but now you're hearing a lot about they call it polyvagal theory. I don't know if you're heard this, but it's been in the news a lot lately. And this is the idea of activating the relaxation nervous system. Well, the relaxation nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, is activated by exhalation. And you blow off. That's why when if you get scared, right, or say you go to your house that you're having somebody scares you, jumps out of a room and says, boom, you go like this, like you inhale real quick.
Right.
That's a manifestation of sympathetic activation, and then you find out it's all a big joke. You go, whoa, like that. That's activation of the parasympathetic nervous system, and you can even do that sighing sound on your own, and you can activate the parasympathetic nervous system just by going, like that. If you want to relax the body, if you want to open up the blood vessels, relax your muscles, just practice sighing. That's a great way to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So when you inhale, you oxygenate, you're actually activating the stress response. As you relax, you're activating the relaxation response. And what's supposed to happen, you're supposed to be able to go back and forth. And learning how to breathe correctly partially involves learning how to exhale correctly, or exhaling more than inhaling. Involves a lot of other things. To your point about eating, when we eat, anything we could do to activate the parasympathetic nervous system is going to improve digestive juices and digestive activity. In fact, while the sympathetic nervous system is called your fight or flight nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system is called your rest and digest nervous system. And that's why saying grace is so important, and not eating when you're under stress, not eating when you're in meetings, or not eating in the car when you're driving, all the things we tend to do. These are really bad strategies if you want to improve your digestion. And for many people, or for a lot of people, that might not matter. But if you have indigestion, or if you have bowel problems, or irritable bowel syndrome, or any Crohn's disease, or any kind of heartburn, or any kind of digestive problems, you might want to pay attention to how you're eating, and eat when you're relaxed. Also, drinking coffee or drinking stimulants after your meals. A lot of people like to drink coffee when they're done with their meals. That's not a smart strategy from a biochemical perspective, because caffeine jacks up the sympathetic nervous system, and it'll suppress digestive juices and digestive function.
That's interesting. That's one of the things that I find, and I tend to be somebody who I think I have relatively low blood sugar. So when I eat a large meal, after the meal, I'm just kind of
That's a hyperinsulin response. That happens a lot. That's a sign of that your insulin is really active, and that typically means that you're eating a lot of carbs, or eating a lot of insulin spiking foods. If you find you're tired after meals, that's a sign that you may be heading into diabetes or pre-diabetic.
Interesting. I mean, I usually think it's because I eat so little carbs. I tend to be, sauerkraut and eggs and pickled things.
Well, no, if you're tired after meals, it means the sugar is leaving the bloodstream really quickly. It means your insulin is super sensitized, and that's what happens on your way to diabetes. And actually, when you think about it, after you eat a meal, if you eat correctly, you should have energy.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be tired. If you're tired after a meal, there's something biochemically that's off. Either you're overloaded the system, or you're not processing food correctly, or you're eating the wrong foods. People will rarely get tired if they munch on a cucumber.
Yeah.
Hear somebody say, I just ate this cucumber and I feel so tired now, I need a nap. It never happens, right?
Right.
If you're eating the right foods, and eating the right amounts of foods, we eat way more than we need to eat. I mean, next time you eat, and I do this too. I'm not judging anybody for that, because I do it too. But notice how little food it takes to fill you. Just be really famished. Don't eat all day. Wait till the end of the day and eat. And notice, no matter how starving you are, I hate that word, but no matter how hungry you are, it only takes 3 bites and you're not hungry anymore.
Yeah, right.
Think about that. If we only ate 3 bites every meal, we would be so much better off. We'd have so much more nutritional resources for building our muscles, and for thinking, and for making our heart pump, and our lungs work, and all the organs of our bodies work better, because as we eat, we actually use nutrition to process our food. So the more foods you eat, if you're not eating correctly, you can actually lose nutrition by eating foods. Especially if you're eating, processed foods that don't have a lot of nutrients in them. It's costing you nutrients to eat.
Right.
Well, so that's why, in addition to hyperbaric oxygen age reversing, almost all studies on intermittent fasting and calorie restriction show that animals that restrict calories, that lower their calories, laboratory animals and various studies and tests that they do, they have longer lifespans. Calorie restriction leads to a longer lifespan.
Well, some of the healthiest people in the world are the I'm gonna slaughter this Daligong people. They also
Where
call
that,
them the San people. They used to say Bushmen, but that's no longer an appropriate term.
okay, all right,
These folks will go out on a hunt. They'll follow a giraffe for 3 days, and they'll just eat little teeny little scraps of dried meat, and that's it.
yeah.
They're just totally focused on what they're doing, and um, uh, able to expend an enormous amount of energy. I mean, just running. We're talking like a 16-hour day of running on just little
Wow.
strips of protein and maybe a couple bits of root that they'd pick up
Well,
along the way.
we culturally now notice when you next time take a drive out there in Santa Cruz or wherever you are,
Mm.
notice how many restaurants there are.
Oh
And how
wow, yeah.
places, right? How many places there are for you to indulge your appetite in, and because of the connection between our emotions
Mm.
and our pleasure hormones and pleasure chemicals and eating, a lot of times, most of the time, even we don't eat because we're hungry. We don't eat from our
Hmm.
for our needs or from our bellies. We eat from our heads.
Yeah,
We
right.
we need to eat, or
Hmm.
it's. I love when people say that sounds good. It's like we eat from our ears, right? Right? Or that
Right,
looks
right.
good.
That's
We eat
neat.
from our eyes. We don't really eat from our bellies.
Mm.
In fact, I lost a bunch of weight a few years ago just by focusing on my belly every time I wanted to eat, every
Mm.
time I thought I wanted to eat,
Mm.
and most of the time I didn't want to eat. My belly was saying, "Don't eat." So
Right.
eating is, I tell people this is kind of funny, but it's really true. Eating's for kids. When you're an adult and as you age, it becomes less and less important. In
Mm.
fact, when you get really old, elderly like me, or pushing it anyway, it becomes almost insignificant. I mean, you
Mm.
want to eat once or twice a day and very small amounts of food. You don't need a lot of food.
Mm.
So eating is a young man's game. It's very hard on the body, and it really boils down to: do you want to live a long life or do you want to enjoy food? Now,
Mm. Mm.
some people say no. It's not worth living a long life without food, and I
Yeah.
respect that. But if you're sick in any way, or you
Mm.
want to accelerate or increase your lifespan or slow down the aging process, paying really close
Mm.
attention to your caloric intake is very, very important. And that's why supplementation is so helpful.
Mm.
Because with supplementation, you get nutrition without calories. And when I talk about intermittent fasting and reducing your food intake, I'm basically talking about calories.
Mm.
Calories represent heat. And
Mm.
just like in the world of computers, you have a little fan in your computer because you don't want, or in your hard drive because you don't want it to get hot. The body's the same way. The body runs best when it's cool.
Mm.
So you want to keep it cool. The more heat you put in the form of calories, the
Right.
hotter the body is, the more work it has to do to cool down, and the more nutrients you're going to burn through, and eventually the shorter your lifespan is going to be.
Well, that's one of the things I find so interesting about those articles I sent you with regards to alternate ways of producing
It was
food.
interesting. Yeah.
There's folks
From air.
who have
It
engineered
wasn't
a.
really from air, though.
What's that?
It wasn't really food from air. And
Oh.
that was the headline, food from air, right? It wasn't really food from air. They use carbon
Mm.
dioxide, use electricity, and they use solar energy, plus water, vitamins,
Mm.
and something else. I forgot what it was. Water, vitamins, and something else to drive these bacteria or yeast, these microbes, to produce protein,
Mm.
which is very effective. You get some great protein out of it. And it's quite brilliant,
Mm.
actually,
Mm.
because you basically use the microbes to produce your food, and it's
Yeah.
really interesting. I thought it was quite
Well,
fascinating, and I think it's the way of the future.
they're talking about a 1/20,000th the land requirement.
It's amazing.
So we're living on this planet right now where we're going and devastating these tropical rainforests in order to grow palm oil of all things. I mean, if you want to do something for the planet, just eliminate palm oil from your diet. That's a great place to start.
It's
Um,
yeah, it's
imagine the world where all of the agricultural land is being retired and it's only boutique heirloom things that we would bother to grow at scale in agricultural plots. You certainly have your own home garden or whatnot, but the majority of food product of what is it, fats, carbs, and proteins are being produced in vats using solar electricity.
That's the way of the future.
As
And they,
long as we do it right. I hate for some kind of horrible slave mush,
right,
that barely
right.
keeps us alive.
The thing is, it's not an unnatural food.
Mm,
It's a natural food. It's being
mm,
produced by microbes,
mm,
but it's a natural food. It's not like an artificial food in any way. It's way better for you than the processed food that comes in boxes and packets and cans and all the things that you get even at the health food store. If you walk
right.
into the health food store, the vast majority of food in the health food store is processed food.
Hmm.
It's in
Right.
boxes and bags and
It's
granolas and
six
you know
different kinds of corn extracts, xanthian gum, and
the vast majority of the food we eat these
mm,
days is processed. Well over
mm,
80 or 90% of the food we eat
mm,
is processed food.
mm. Well, now I don't know if you remember. We might have talked about this a while ago, but I found it really fascinating. There was this guy who ended up launching a business that produced a product that was the balance of all the macronutrients that your body needs.
I remember you told me this a few years ago. You wanted me to make that.
Well, the thing that was going on with that is that because it's rather precise, you figure out what your optimal calories are, and then you measure out exactly how much you need.
Whatever happened to that?
I haven't researched it. He had a business. I got a little turned off when they were very gung ho on using a GMO
Okay.
in their products.
I
Uh,
think he had a taste problem, didn't he?
I don't recall. Maybe.
It did taste good. I remember
Oh, the food didn't taste good. Oh,
it did taste good.
I thought that everyone really liked it though. I thought that was
Yeah.
there were forums though, of folks coming up with their own formulas, and I mean we sell meal replacement products.
But they can't be totally complete. And vitamins don't really taste that good.
Yeah.
Vitamins and minerals don't taste that good unless they're in a plant.
Mm.
When they're concentrated, like in a supplement or something, they don't really taste that great.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to grind up a vitamin B and then
No,
eat that. It'd be a little intense,
no.
but tangy tangerine tastes pretty darn
And,
good.
that's a really good point because supplementing is not great. I,
Mm.
I wish that I didn't have, I've said this before, I wish I didn't have to supplement.
Mm.
I wish I could get everything I needed from food, but we've created a situation today where food just doesn't have the nutrition that it's supposed to have,
Mm.
and that's from the ground up.
Mm.
So really, we don't have any alternatives, and supplementing I think it's a my personal belief is it's a necessary evil, and
Yeah.
I've seen the most incredible health turnarounds in
Mm.
terms of blood pressure and weight
Mm.
loss, and people getting off their medication and eliminating skin problems, reversing almost all health challenges that you can think of. I've seen reversed
Mm.
when people start a supplement program. So to me, the concept of it is troubling,
Mm.
but you just have to do it.
Yeah.
No, it's like insurance policy. You
Yeah.
just have to do it these days because you're not going to get what you get from food.
Well, there's empirical evidence, the type of knowledge that you gain from experience, and all you have to do is have a scoop of tangy tangerine and some water, and
Exactly.
within 20 minutes you have all the empirical evidence that you need to know that this is something that's
Exactly.
benefiting your body.
Almost instantly, especially if you do it first thing in the morning when you tend to be nutrient deficient.
Mm.
If you do your Beyond Tangerine first thing in the morning, if you're nutrient deficient, it's better than caffeine.
Mm.
You get an energy buzz. I've heard
Yeah.
people say they don't like doing Beyond Tangerine at night because they can't sleep
Mm.
because they find that they have too much energy.
Right. I recommend to people not to take it in the evenings
Yeah.
for that reason.
So there's no getting around the fact that the nutritional supplementation, when it's done correctly, can be an amazingly helpful thing to do.
Mm.
But in an ideal world, we'd be getting everything we needed from food.
Right. Well, I mean, wouldn't it be neat to have? It's so difficult to diet. It's so difficult to figure out. I don't even like the word diet. What do you're trying to, something wants to die? Just you want trying to make yourself die a little bit or something. I just never felt comfortable with it. But to have to be able to sort of say, well, here is my meal for the month, every day for the month. This is exactly what I'm going to eat every day. And it's all already in the exact proportions that is going to be optimal for your body. Mix in the exact amount of nutrients. If folks who are dealing with all sorts of allergic reactions and not being able to figure out what it is, and the problems that you've brought up with regards to leaky gut being such a big deal, something that isn't going to cause any of those issues, and you just get on this program, and
Right.
you can always reintroduce foods that you enjoy at some point in time, and you'll have a very good measure of which of those were actually causing a problem.
Veggies. You can't get around veggies. There's things in veggies
The phytonutrients, eh?
that you can't duplicate. Yeah,
Mm,
phytonutrients that are not duplicatable. So
mm,
veggies.
mm,
Eat veggies all day, and then other foods, just small amounts of it. But the bulk, I believe, the bulk of our caloric intake should come from vegetables
mm, mm,
and small amounts of fruits, quality protein, as close to natural, as close to unprocessed as possible. That's why eggs are so perfect.
mm.
About as unprocessed as you can get. Even meat, you have to cook, and you
Right.
don't really know what's going on with the cows and how they're feeding the cows, how they're
Mm,
slaughtering the cows.
mm.
So much that goes into meat.
Yeah.
Fish is probably a little bit better, but eggs are just so perfect.
Mm.
It's, you got this amazing little thing that's got every single nutrient that a person needs.
Not an accident. it's
No,
it's a little too
an
perfect.
egg is a life.
Yeah.
It's
Mm. Ben, you mentioned fruits. It seems to me like the sugar in fruits is.
better than sugar in a candy for sure. And
Mm,
plus, fruits are very high in a special kind of water, structured water. You also get a crystalline water.
mm,
You also get fiber, which slows down the release of the sugar. And the fructose is probably not as problematic as some other forms of as straight as sucrose, which
mm,
is a combination of glucose and fructose. So fructose is probably not as bad. Although it does have its own problems, and high fructose corn syrup or straight fructose is definitely problematic. But the
mm,
fructose in fruit is probably better for you. But it's still, today's fruits are bred, genetically modified to be really, really sweet.
mm,
In fact,
mm,
they take out some of the medicinal compounds through the breeding process, the genetic modification process. A lot of the more medicinal compounds that make fruits have a bitter kind of taste to them, alkaloids that have a little bitterness to them,
mm.
they take them out so that the fruits can be sweet. And then the fruits are made to be really big.
Yeah.
Crab apples on the African savannah were like this. If there
Right.
were apples,
Right.
back in the day, apples were like this. Today, an apple's like this.
Yeah.
I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I've seen,
No, there's some
I've seen
monster
monster
fruits and
apples
veggies
out.
out there for sure.
Exactly. So you know what? You don't need the whole banana. You
Mm,
don't need the whole apple. So
mm,
they're very nutritious. There's no getting around it. There's lots of nutritional value, especially in the peels.
mm,
But today's fruits are just problematic. And fruit juices, they take all that stuff out, all the medicinal compounds out, and you just get
uh,
the pure essence of the fruit, which is the sugar. And
mm,
those are really problematic, fruit juices.
mm,
And
mm,
whole fruits, if you do them correctly, there's some definitely nutritional value, but you just got to take it easy on them. Vegetables, you don't have to worry about. Vegetables, you go crazy with.
mm,
Especially the more medicinal ones like cruciferous vegetables. The cruciferous vegetables are incredibly, it's just hard
mm,
to describe how medicinally valuable they are. Cabbage, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, broccoli. They call them the cruciferous vegetables.
mm.
Those are so medicinal. It's unbelievable. In fact, they're so medicinal, some people can't even eat them. They're that medicinal. But for people who can take them, they're unbelievably powerful. Cabbage, especially for the digestive system. Cabbage contains something called vitamin U, which is used
Mm,
to address ulcers. U
mm,
for ulcers.
mm.
But some people can't. Some people have a problem with the cruciferous vegetables, and that's unfortunate if they
Yeah,
do.
yeah. Ben, I remember being on a road trip and going into this was a while back, probably 20 years ago. And certainly folks have become a lot more food conscious in the ensuing decades. But I remember going into, I think it was a Ralph somewhere near San Diego, and I wanted vegetables. I wanted, my kind of food. And what they had, the only organic thing they had was a bag of dried out mini carrots, and the only tomato they had was a romaine tomato. You know what they're like the little bitty ones you've used to make sauce with or something like that. That was their
Roma,
tomatoes.
Roma tomato.
Roma, that's right. Romaine's the lettuce. They had iceberg lettuce.
That
That
was
was
it.
the vegetable section. I mean, I don't even know if they had peas or corn, maybe canned somewhere or something like that. It was just a
We
different
don't like
comprehension of what vegetables are.
Culturally speaking, we don't like vegetables because they contain those bitter compounds,
Mm,
those medicinal compounds.
mm,
So, as a culture, we don't like. There are people who like vegetables, obviously, but
yeah.
culturally speaking, vegetables are not as popular as fruits. It's funny
Mm,
when they had this whole. They had the lockdown was happening. Everybody went to the supermarket. They were buying all kinds of foods. There were plenty of vegetables.
mm,
There's no shortage in vegetables, but they were out
mm,
of canned foods. They were out of pasta. They were out of potato chips and popcorn. But veggies there are plenty of, because culturally we don't like to eat them.
Mm-hmm.
Although, as I say, there are individuals obviously who like vegetables, but as a culture we don't, and that's because they contain these alkaloids. Alkaloids are bitter compounds, but those are also the medicinal compounds.
Mm. Mm. You know, I was a vegetarian for about 7 years. I still ate fish. I still certainly ate a lot of eggs. But somehow the word would get to somebody that, oh, he's a vegetarian. And I'd show up to have a meal with a bunch of folks, and they'd say, well, we made you some peas. We wanted to accommodate you and your strange behavior, you know. And that's kind of what people, they would say, here's your vegetable. It's peas. You know? And here I am in this world. I mean, they must think I'm insane calling myself a vegetarian. Here I am in this world where I've got steamed kale and chard and asparagus galore, and like you say, Brussels sprouts and as much steamed broccoli with butter on it. And there's some really good, wonderful vegetables that I fear that a lot of people don't really experience. I imagine there's a sort of Midwest area where, ironically, they grow this stuff, but nobody really knows what the vegetable portion is. It's potatoes and peas. That's what people think, the veggies are.
That's too bad, because vegetables, especially if you add butter to your vegetables. I like adding, nutritional oils. I know that's kind of controversial, the whole subject of oils, but nutritional oils tend to pull out the fat-soluble nutrients. Even butter will pull out the fat-soluble nutrients. And there's some interesting reactions that happen between veggies and olive oil that releases some really powerful nutrients. And it's thought that the Mediterranean diet's benefits are due to the reaction that takes place between olive oil and vegetables in salads.
Huh.
The compounds that are released. Now, I know veggies or oils are kind of a controversial subject, we'll say.
Well, you don't want to use olive oil that's aged. That's for darn sure.
That's really the problem. Heating oils is not a good idea, and aged oils are not a good idea, because oils are unstable. And this is where the controversy comes from. It's because they're unstable. You got lots of what are called lipid peroxides, which are a very powerful type of free radical that occurs in fats. And vegetable oils contain lots of really high energy compounds, double bond compounds. They call unsaturated fats or unsaturated lipids. And these unsaturated, monounsaturated, polyunsaturated fats tend to be very, very unstable, and they can create problems. And that's where the controversy comes from. But a fresh oil that's kept in a cold place and used fresh, and it kept in a dark bottle can be really, really very important. A lot of nutritional value. And to me, it seems like you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater, if I can use that phrase, to say no oils. But that's my opinion, and I know other people have their own opinions, and everybody have to make their own decision. But I believe small amounts of oil with vegetables can be really helpful. But certainly butter is not a problem, and everybody likes butter. Butter on top of broccoli with a little bit of salt. That is so delicious.
Is it obvious that it's close to dinner time?
Yeah.
Certainly feeling a bit hungry here. There's a whole bunch of interesting herbs and spices that we have as products. The term micronutrients always comes to mind. I always think about what unique compounds could be in some thyme or some.
Oh yeah, spices are loaded with what are called adaptogens. In fact, all plants contain adaptogens, but they're concentrated in these spices. And these adaptogens are very important for stabilizing and protecting cells. Adaptogens are cell protectors. And they're not just in spices, they're in all plant material. Plants make these adaptogenic compounds. And these adaptogenic compounds are not considered to be essential nutrients. They're flavonoids, polyphenols, carotenes, coumarins, got various names. But they're, generally speaking, their job is to help cells deal with stress. They're like stress management molecules, and spices are loaded with them. So spices are not gonna change your life necessarily dramatically, but they can sure support health really well. And we were talking about butter, adding butter and adding oil to veggies. If you add butter or oil to spices, in the same way that you'll release the nutrients from your veggies, you'll also release these adaptogenic compounds from spices as well. And if you have an intestinal problem, by the way, you're going to have a harder time leveraging or accessing these nutrients, these phytonutrients and adaptogens from veggies. If you have fat malabsorption syndrome, intestinal problems, gallbladder issues, if you had a gallbladder taken out. So if you have any of these problems, adding a little bit of fat to your veggies can help, and also make absolutely positively sure you're using digestive enzymes, like the ultimate enzymes from longevity, to help support the absorption or the assimilation of fats, the release of fats and the assimilation from fats from veggies. And it's important to realize that veggies have these fatty materials. The phytonutrients are fatty. They tend to be in the fatty compound, even in cucumber or even in lettuce. You know, you see lettuce and it's like 96%, 97% water. You don't think it's very fatty, but 3% of it is fatty. And that fatty material is where the chlorophyll is and where the other phytonutrients are. And so no matter what your veggies are, if you have some kind of fat malabsorption issue or a gallbladder issue or bile issue or a liver issue for that matter, you're going to want to make sure that you're using your ultimate enzymes, and you're going to want to make sure that you're using a little bit of oil or a little bit of butter to help release the fats from the veggies.
Well, now, when we really unpack the process of getting nutrients into our bodies, it occurs to me that we, as we were saying earlier, we're cultural about it. We're not really scientific about it. It's so interesting to hear about this sort of thing that you want to add the butter to help draw the fats out of the vegetables and allow your body to process them. I mean, sometimes we do kind of happen upon these formulas in our various recipes.
They taste good.
Yeah,
they taste
right.
We all like fat. We all like the taste of fat. It's the processed fat that's the problem. And trans fats and processed fats can wreak havoc on the body, especially, by the way, on the digestive system. Fats that are inflammatory can be one of the major causes of leaky gut syndrome. Excess ingestion of inflammatory fats, processed fats, trans fats, cooked fats, heated oils. A lot of these can be pro-inflammatory, and they can cause inflammation at the level of the intestine, and that can lead to leaky gut. And we talked last time about these lipopolysaccharides, these LPSs or endotoxins that can enter into the bloodstream through leaky gut, that can be responsible for Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, cancer. Pretty much all health challenges, chronic health challenges, have some aspect of stuff getting into the bloodstream through a leaky gut.
Well, we've got an interesting future ahead of us. It seems like the next 10 years we're going to see how we produce food completely change.
Yeah.
I think it's going to happen real fast.
We have an interesting few years ahead of us for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, right. Regardless, right. But I bet you and I will come back to this video in half a decade, and we'll say, "Remember when we had that conversation?"
We'll say, "Oh my God, I looked young." That's what I say sometimes.
Yeah.
When I see pictures of myself from 10 years ago.
Right. Likewise. Well, cheers, Ben. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Jonty. Nice to see you again. We'll talk again soon.